Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am sharing my Tamales de Fresa recipe with you. I have made these tamales for several holidays in the past, but you don't really need an occasion to make them, so let's get started with the recipe. I want to start off by saying that you can definitely make these tamales using a hand mixer, a stand mixer, or you can do what I am doing today and just using your hands. In this particular video, I will be using just my hands in case you don't have any equipment at home, so you can see that this recipe is doable with what you have. I am adding in my vegetable shortening to my mixing bowl. This particular shortening is actually butter flavored. That's why it looks yellow. And I feel like for this recipe, we needed this extra butter flavor. But if you have just regular shortening or regular butter, the replacement is equal parts. So if you were replacing butter, it's the exact same amount, which would be, in this case, I'm using 2.5 cups of vegetable shortening. If you're using butter, it would be 2.5 cups of butter. Then I am adding on the dry ingredients one by one. I am starting with my maseca. Remember that for this recipe, it has to be the maseca that says tamales. This maseca has a very particular texture and added ingredients to ensure that your tamales turn out delicious. For this amount of tamales, I am using 2 pounds of the maseca. It usually comes in 4-pound bags, but I just use half of the bag. I'm also adding in my sugar, and for the sugar, the measurement of sugar is 3.25 cups of granulated sugar, or it can be brown sugar or a mixture of both. I also added in half a tablespoon of cinnamon, and at this point what we are doing is we just want to make sure we kind of start to mix in a few of the ingredients. I also have the coconut milk that I'm using is the specific brand. I particularly like the taste of this coconut milk, but if you have a different coconut milk brand, you can use that. I wouldn't recommend using coconut milk from a can because it's a little bit thicker. So make sure that it is one that comes in like a gallon form. At this point, you want to add the remainder of your ingredients, which would be your vanilla, your salt, your baking powder, and I also am going to add in my food flavoring, which would be my 1 tablespoon of strawberry flavor. I am using the Amoretti brand, but if you have a different strawberry flavor available at your grocery store, you can use that. This brand you usually can find online on Amazon. You can do it directly through their website, and I highly recommend it because this will give your tamales that extra flavor that they need. Now that we have reached this point, we want to go ahead and add in some of the liquid. So I will have all of the measurements down in the description box below. So if I've forgotten to mention some of the ingredient quantities here in the video, they will be listed in the description box for you. So please don't worry about that. I also added in a few drops of pink food coloring just to give it a little touch of pink. You can definitely skip this part, but I feel like it's essential for it. So I'm going to go ahead and add in just a tiny bit of my coconut milk. It was approximately 1/4 cup. and I'm going to begin to try to knead this and mix it. Now, if you have a stand mixer or a hand mixer, this process will be a lot faster, a lot easier. At this point of my project, my kids were asleep. I was very tired. I think it was 11 p.m. So I didn't want to look for any of the attachments or make any extra noise in the house. And I also wanted to show you that you can definitely do this by hand, because the first time that I made them approximately 7 years ago, I did this by hand. So it's gonna take a little bit longer, but it's definitely worth it. So you're just going to continue to mash everything together. Make sure that you try to get in there and mix the sugar, dissolve some of the baking powder, spread the salt, the cinnamon that is in there. And once you feel like you have some control, continue to add in some of the liquid. So at this point, you're going to still have some dry parts of flour or dry ingredients. Make sure to continue kneading this. We also need to add in dehydrated strawberries so that we can build on the strawberry flavor. So at this point, you want to make sure that your strawberries are turned into powder. You can achieve this by simply just crushing them in the bag, which is exactly what I did here. Or if you want to get a little bit more fancy and you have a food processor, you can mash them there. You can also place them into your food blender and do it there, into your bullet and do it there. And basically what we're looking for is a powder. What this is going to do is it's going to add little specks of strawberry into your masa, and it's going to give it that extra flavor, that extra color that it needs, and it's just going to build on the texture and the flavor when you go to bite into these tamales. At this point, we want to make sure to add in all the liquid. And what I did for my masa is that I wanted to make sure that all the other ingredients were mixed in before I add in the dehydrated strawberries and the raisins. So you'll see me here just kind of like continue to knead this. Your dough is going to be a little bit sticky. So if it's sticking to your fingers, that is completely fine. The measurements that I give you are exactly what you need. You don't need to knead this until it no longer sticks to your finger. It's going to be a little bit sticky. So here you see me just mashing these strawberries into a fine powder, but mine wasn't too fine. I had some chunks that were a little bit big. They weren't huge, but it was perfectly fine for the texture that I was going for. So once you go ahead and crush that, add it into your masa or your dough. If you have any liquid left, add it in. And at this point, you want to add in your raisins. This part is completely optional. The raisins you can completely skip, but I will let you know, because I know some of you are going to ask in the comments if you can skip that or replace. You can definitely replace for something else, like a different dry fruit. But I feel like the raisins give it just a, I don't know, like a cinnamony, seasonal holiday flavor, and that's what we're going for. You can leave it out, but I highly recommend that you make these with the raisins. It actually is more satisfying doing this by hand because you're able to feel the dough, you can feel the masa and the texture of it. And what we're looking for is for it to be a little bit squishy, not too runny to the point where it's like liquidy, but you don't want this masa or this dough to be too stiff to the point where it doesn't stick to anything. You want it to be manageable, but you also want it to be a little bit soft, and that's exactly what you can achieve by doing this by hand. And here, as you can see, it is completely stuck to my fingers. So you don't need to make sure that this is not sticking to you. This is the exact thing that we are looking for. For this portion of the tamal making, you can definitely do this prior to starting your dough. But the most important thing of spreading and making sure that your hojas are ready, your hojas need to be not necessarily washed, but they need to be in a water bath. What I do is I basically get warm water into a big pan or a big bowl big enough to fit this whole bag of hojas, and I usually use lukewarm water, not completely cold water. So the goal of this is to dip them in this water, take any of the extra corn hair out. If there's any like little, I don't know, like little flyaway pieces of hojas that don't belong there, take them out. It's kind of like a pre-cleaning process, but the goal is for these hojas to be soft. The goal is for them to be manageable, and the goal is for you to be able to fold them and bend them without breaking, because the majority of these hojas have been sitting in this bag for a while now. So if you go to try to manage them or use them without dipping them in water, some of them will break. They won't be as bendable, so when you try to close your tamal, it might not stay closed. So that's why we do this part. And as you see here, I went ahead and placed my hojas into this bowl. It has a little bit of water under, just to make sure that they don't dry out as they sit there while I am spreading. The goal of spreading your masa is to make sure that the masa stays in the tamal. That is literally just the goal. You can make your tamales as big or as small as you want. For this particular occasion, I brought these to my daughter's school, so it was going to be preschoolers eating them, so I made them a little bit smaller. The original recipe makes between 40 to 42 tamales. This time around, I got 50 tamales because I made them a little bit smaller. So I also know that a few of you are going to ask for measurements of how much masa goes into each hoja. If you're looking for specific measurements, there isn't a specific measurement, but if you're looking for a ballpark, it's approximately a quarter of a cup to a third of a cup of masa that goes into each hoja. And that's going to depend on how big or how small you want your tamales to be. You can use a spoon to spread it. You can use one of these little spreaders, like jam spreaders, to spread the masa. You can do it with your hands. My mom usually does it with a spoon and then with her hands. Some people like to use like, I think they're called like bench scrapers, and it's some like these little, it's like a long scraper that you usually use for cutting dough. People like to use those to spread into the hoja. You can literally spread the hoja however you want. The goal is for the masa to stay in there and to not be pouring out. You can also arrange your tamales however you want. This particular time, what I did is I actually spread the tamales and rolled them, placed them into the refrigerator, and I steamed them, boiled them. It's more like of a steam. I steamed them the next night because I was bringing them the following morning to the school, and I just didn't want to do this last minute because I was like, oh my god, what if it doesn't work? And then another problem that I had is that my pot is too small. My pot will literally only steam 20 tamales, and I had to steam 50. So I did this in batches. That's why I started early with the process. For steaming your tamales, you want to have a pot with a steamer section or portion to it. This is it's literally not supposed to be a steamer pot, but I made it one because I don't want to buy another pot. I basically bought the little ring on Amazon to fit the circumference of my pot. And it has about, I would say, I think it's a cup of water at the bottom, because my pot is so long that it's just deep. But it really, your only goal is to make sure that it has a steamer portion. Fill the steamer portion not completely all the way up, so you don't want the water to be touching your tamales. It just depends on how wide your steaming pot is. Just make sure that however big or wide it is, it doesn't come up to touch the tamales. What I did next is I added some hojas at the bottom for extra protection. In case any of the water seeps in, I want to make sure that the water doesn't go into the masa, because that's going to prevent your tamales from steaming correctly. And next, you just want to place them. You don't want them to be too tight because our masa has baking powder, so we want to make sure that our tamales are able to fluff up a little bit. And if you place them too tightly, we can't do that. So what I did here is, I believe I added 20 or 24 tamales to my pot. If your pot is bigger and you have the space, just make sure they're not in there too tightly. So I'm basically just going to arrange them. And then once we're arranged, another important part is that you seal the pot correctly. You are going to see me use grocery store bags. I think they're called nylon bags. And the goal of this is to keep the steam in and to help it cook. So what I did is, once I finished arranging my tamales in the pot, I went ahead and added in a wet kitchen cloth. So you want to make sure that you wet a kitchen cloth, you wring out the majority of the water, and you're going to place it on top of your tamales. That's going to be your first seal. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to add in that bag for added sealing protection. And then finally, the cover of your pot. And what this is going to do is, this is going to help the steam circulate, and it's going to help it do it a little bit more evenly versus just placing the top on there, because sometimes pots don't have good seals, and this is going to help in that. Your pot should be in a medium-high heat, and you're going to check it halfway through. So the total amount of time that I steamed these tamales for was 1.5 hours. Halfway through, at the 45-minute mark, I checked it and I added in 1/4 cup of water. You want to do this because you want to make sure that your pot doesn't run out of water. If your pot runs out of water, your pot is going to start burning at the bottom, and that burn taste or smell is going to come to the top, and your tamales are going to taste like burn. So that is very important. Check your tamales halfway through. Make sure to add in at least 1/4 cup of water, just to make sure that they don't dry out. Oh, and I mentioned this backwards earlier. So you add the nylon bag first, and then the wet kitchen cloth, and then your pot topper, the top of your pot. Thank you so much for watching my video, friends. Don't forget to leave me any of your questions down in the comments below. All the details for the recipe will be written in the description box. I will also have a link to my website so that you can get the printable version of this recipe. If you try it, please let me know in the comments below. Again, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give my video a like. If you haven't already, subscribe to my channel and share your video with a friend. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.